Emily Baker, and I will be presenting on W.E.B. Du Bois. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, better known as W.E.B. Du Bois, was born on February 26, 1868, in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. From the day of his birth to the day of his death on August 27, 1963, he led a very successful life. One of his biggest successes, perhaps even his greatest, was his writing. He wrote 21 books, edited 15 more, and published over 100 essays and articles. His writing has helped to shape people's thoughts about African Americans and racism. In the town of Great Barrington, Massachusetts, where Du Bois was raised, deep-rooted black families were not as frowned upon as they were in other places during this time. The people living in his town were much more prejudiced towards the new Irish settlers. Du Bois came from a heritage which consisted of black and white blood, resulting in him having lighter black skin and blue eyes. This was not a problem among his neighbors or his school friends. He was generally accepted by those he lived around. Du Bois described this time in his life as a happy, sometimes idyllic haven from the radical and social conflicts which he would ultimately devote his life. It is inspiring to me to see someone who did not experience the hurtful discrimination as a child still understand the importance of standing against the racism in the world around him. Shortly after graduating from high school as the valedictorian, Du Bois attended Fisk University and then went on to study at Harvard, where he received his bachelor's and his master's in history. In 1892, he decided to take a break from Harvard and travel through Western Europe for 2 years while attending school in Berlin. When he returned in 1894, he accepted the position as chairman of the classics department at Wilberforce University. The next year, Du Bois went back to Harvard and received his Ph.D. in history. At the end of his schooling in 1896, W.E.B. Du Bois married Nina Gomer, and they later had 2 children. That same year, Du Bois wrote his first study entitled The Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States of America. This sparked the beginning of his representation for the African American people. A few years later, in 1900, Du Bois attended the first Pan-African Conference, where he was seen as Black America's leading intellectual. He was one of the few African Americans in attendance at the conference, which made his opinion important because it was coming from someone who understood the circumstances African Americans were experiencing. Along with his regular attendance at the Pan-African Conference, Du Bois also founded the Niagara Movement and was among the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as NAACP. He worked closely with the NAACP and even edited their magazine entitled The Crisis until 1934, when he realized that the NAACP's commitment to integration did not align with his belief that African Americans should have their own controlled institutions and schools. For the next 10 years, Du Bois decided to work on his own, but eventually rejoined with the NAACP in 1944 as the Director of Special Research, which is a position that he held until 1948. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois was a man very dedicated to his cause, and because of his dedication, our society is much less discriminatory towards people of a different race. Classrooms are no longer separated by the color of one's skin, and each student is looked at as equal. The fight against racism is over and equality is key. Because of the hard work that W.E.B. Du Bois put into his cause, people are treated more fairly today than they were back then.